welcome back. You're watching the Money Show, NSE Prosperous India special right here on ET Now. I'm Mubina Kabasi, and unfortunately, due to breaking news, this is going to be a short and sweet edition, but an important one. There's lots happened in the mutual fund world in the week gone by, and I'm talking specifically about the big downgrades that have come in on DHFL's commercial papers. Not only has that impacted the stock market, it has also impacted mutual funds that have large exposure to the debt that is, owned by them, especially in DHFL. In fact, some NAVs as well have tanked, and how? Primarily the DHFL Prime America Fund, which has, in fact, one of the funds has actually tanked 50% in terms of the NAV in just one day. Similarly, lots of other mutual funds, the UTI Mutual Fund, amongst others, the Reliance Mutual Fund have a significant amount of exposure to DHFL. So in such a scenario, what should you do then with your mutual fund holdings? And the question again crops up. A lot of us believe that debt mutual funds may be relatively safer. So to bust that myth and to sort of talk about the entire conundrum that mutual fund investors are currently in, we have with us Feroze Aziz of Anand Rathi Private Wealth Management. Feroze, it's always a pleasure having you with us. So give us your golden words of advice amidst the entire turmoil that we are seeing, not only in one single stock, but also for many mutual funds out there that have seen a significant crack come by in NAVs. Would you advocate patience? Would you advocate no knee-jerk reactions on the part of investors?
Yes, Mubina, I think what's happened is there are about 136 funds, mutual funds, which actually have an exposure to DHFL. The reason being, every time a AAA rated company goes default or almost gets downgraded to non-investment grade, then the problem is going to be very widespread. What people need to notice is these were ILNFS and DHFL were AAA rated companies which have got downgraded. These were not A plus or AA plus. They were absolute highest degree of credit rating. So what's happened is, point one, 136 funds have it. Should you panic? Should you not panic? There is no benefit of panicking, because the rule of SEBI and the regulation of managing or computing the NAV states that all the value of the bond, almost 75% of that is marked down already. That's why, Mubina, like you said, there are some schemes which have dropped 50% in value. So selling it now actually makes no sense, because even if there is a recovery, you will lose out on the possible recovery, which is not a negligible probability. There's a very high probability of DHFL paying back, because it's a liquidity mismatch is what we are given to understand from the industry. And when we dwell deep into the balance sheet and the kind of cash flows the company expects, there is a reasonable probability that the default situation can still be reversed. So no knee-jerk reaction, point one. It's a widespread crisis, like you rightly said, Mubina. Point three, if your scheme has more than 8% in DHFL, then you need to probably evaluate an exit. But if it's less than 8%, the damage is already done. You might end up losing more from tax and exit load perspective than what you're trying to save in the first place.
Only if, your exposure to DHFL, the fund's exposure rather to DHFL is more than 8%, is when you must, give your fund a relook. But otherwise, just be a bit patient. And anyway, we as well in the stock markets do advocate that never sell in the thick of bad news. You're just going to end up, like Feroze said, with the tax expense and, exit charges as well. But let's try and get in questions and queries then. And we have Sachin Gupta, who has emailed us his question. He says, I want to build a corpus of 5 crores in 15 years. He wants to know, can I increase my investment by 10% on a year-on-year basis? And then he's given us a bifurcation of how he has split up his SIPs. So there's Axis Blue Chip, Reliance Large Cap, Mirae Asset India Equity, Canara Robeco Emerging Equity, Mirae Emerging Blue Chip, Kotak Standard Multi-Cap, and L&T Mid Cap. I think the bias is more towards large caps, but again, he's put more money in the multi-cap and the mid-cap names, 10,000 there, but the large cap ones have 5,000 roughly. So it's quite a lot of money actually he's putting in SIPs, almost 60,000 rupees, and spread across 7 SIPs. So Feroze, any recommendations on the overall money that he's putting in, and do you think this much is enough for accumulating a good 5 crores in 15 years?
I think if it might not be sufficient. So there is a margin. The good news is that he is almost there. Sachin has actually invested a reasonable corpus on a monthly basis. It will also depend on how long has he been investing in, which information we currently don't have. But I think if his money, his investments could go up by about 10-15%, then he would get there, even with a 13 to 14% kind of a return per annum. Then comes the question of what's the probability of the Indian equity markets and in turn the mutual funds delivering 13 to 14%. I would say very high over the next 10-15 years. So I think he's on the right track. Minor modification in terms of amount should get him there, point one. Point two, when you look at his schemes, the good part is he has a well-diversified portfolio across capitalization. There are minute changes. One is Axis Blue Chip requires an exit because it's a scheme which will continue to underperform, and it has in the recent past. The other one thing which there could be a learning for all viewers is that he has two funds managed by the same fund manager, Mr. Surana. So it's important that he exits one of them. Which is nothing but the Mirae Asset Blue Chip Fund, Mirae Emerging Blue Chip Fund can be replaced with Reliance Large Cap, and he can also buy himself an SBI focused equity whenever he wishes to add some more SIP.
That's a very interesting learning, actually. It always makes sense to sort of avoid having the same fund manager and have two funds of the same fund manager. Unfortunately, we'll have to just call it a day on this edition of, the show. Feroze, thank you so much for joining in. Well, yes, breaking news takes precedence. We had to address that. And yeah, we did have that big news with respect to the RBI circular. Okay, on that note, we'll have to wrap it up. So thank you so much for watching.